ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Costa Rica Crypto. So today I'm sitting down with my man Ricardo, who is the CEO of Blockbase, and we've talked to him a few times before, but today's going to be a little bit different. Today we're going to be talking about decentralized databases. What does it mean? We're going to keep it pretty approachable. So if some of these buzzwords are kind of killing you, we're going to explain like what they are, why it's valuable. And we're going to talk about Blockbase, talk about some new progressions, and just talk about why decentralization in databases is important, because I think it is. Welcome, Ricardo. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Matt.
It's good to see you again.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to be here.
What's the latest with the project, buddy? What have you guys been up to? I know you guys just launched your mainnet for this network. Tell me a little bit about what's been happening since the last time we talked.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff is happening. So finally, we've launched the technology. So it's running in the mainnet currently, and it's got about, 11, 12 nodes protecting the network. And this is people from all around the world. So we're actually pretty proud of ourselves at the moment. It's running fine. So this is running for 3 weeks now. We're still polishing stuff, but it's almost ready. So the technology of Blockbase is almost ready, which is kind of cool. This has been almost 2 years of intense research and development, and a lot of tears and a lot of nights. But it's getting done. So it's really cool to be at this stage.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to kind of break it down for anybody who's like watching and they're peering in. They're like, what is a node? How does it work? And I don't want to get too technical, but today we're going to be talking about how much money data breaches cost companies and how much money people have to spend on security to be able to protect their data and some of the problems with that. But if you were to kind of explain, without getting too technical, these nodes, how they work and how that actually contributes to the security of the system and what you guys are doing, how would you kind of word that, Ricardo? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think I can explain it in a really non-technical way. So
perfect. Basically,
what the nodes are storing are all the changes that you would do to a traditional database, like all the log of all operations. So what they store is like the proof of everything that happened to a set of databases. So if some company needed that type of proof to make sure that their data wasn't like compromised or changed in a secret way without them knowing it, they would use a technology like that, and that log, that history log, would be secured by a public network of nodes. So that's the basic concept of it.
For sure.
And that doesn't exist. We don't know about any other technology that provides this at the moment.
No, and what is kind of having the number of these different validators, like what essentially does that do for the security of the network? Why not just have one validator? Why not just have two?
Yeah, so basically if you have one validator, that's the same as having like a traditional database stored on a server that you manage.
Yeah.
So that validator goes down or deletes the data, you just lost your proof. So the more validators you have, the more probability you have of having that proof. And they're all working like together and against each other because they are looking out to what other guys are doing. So it's like the consensus mechanism of any blockchain. There's a set of rules, and if you don't obey the rules, all the nodes are going to fall on top of you and you're going to be kicked out of the network. So the more nodes you have, the more security you have. That's the basic premise of it. So the company that would use that, the company would have to pay more if he wanted. If it wanted the bigger network to secure the databases. That has to be like that. So it wouldn't be possible in any other way.
I think that's like pretty much, and a lot of people might be watching this, might have kind of heard this decentralization term thrown around. And I think it's something that's like really thrown around in our space, but outside of the space, I got to ask my friends sometimes who are not technical, not like blockchain people, what does decentralization mean? And they look at me and they're like, they have no idea. And I'm not always I think there's definitely a huge spectrum of decentralization. And I think different spectrums are appropriate for different cases, right? But essentially centralization, single source of power, single source of control. decentralization, multiple sources of control. So you have all these other validators keeping each other in check, making sure that they're doing the right thing. And for anybody who's like looking in, they might be wondering like, okay, cool. So no single source of power. Why do you think, in your own words, that that's important for network security and for data validation? I know you've got some stats, I've got some stats, and it's pretty interesting when you actually hear about how much security is costing companies. But maybe you can just kind of kick it off and give me your breakdown about what is different? What's the primary benefit of what you guys are doing with all these different verification checks on the network and keeping things secure as opposed to in just one particular database?
Yeah, so I don't know the stats out of my head, but I know it costs trillions of dollars each year to secure because of data theft and data changes and so forth. So it's a huge, huge problem. And when you dive into it, you notice that it's been growing. So every year there's more and more problems, and it usually appears in the news. So this recently with Twitter, right?
Yep.
It was hacked and information. It could have been like the World War III because of that. So information gets stolen, information gets hacked, gets changed, and so forth. That's a big problem, and it's growing. Yeah, and usually, so there are many little details about it. For example, it usually takes more than half a year to detect a leak of your data, like a hack, if you detect it. So that's a big problem. So you find out like half a year later, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Like 2/3 of the hacks are due to people not using encryption or not using encryption right. So there's a big problem in using encryption. And one that's a surprising stat from one standpoint, but from another actually makes kind of sense. So 1/3 of these hacks involve inside actors, right? It's people from the inside that are motivating the situation.
Yep.
So having just a centralized system is a big problem. And there are many examples where this type of situations can happen. I think I've mentioned this before, but I personally watched one. I was, I presenced one of the situations. So 14 years ago or 15 years ago, I don't know, I don't remember, perhaps longer than that, when I was an intern in a little company here in Lisbon. That company had all the traffic tickets in Lisbon, right? It had the database of that. So anytime like a guy from the company got a traffic ticket, they just deleted the record. So that's a simple example, but how when you centralize power, you get these types of situations, right?
Yeah.
And if you put that on a public log, they couldn't delete it. They could, but it would show on the log, and basically they would get caught. And this is just a tiny company. And now when we go to like governments and big businesses, it's crazy. It's crazy what happens there.
Yeah. Banks.
So it's a big problem. It's a huge problem.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Banks, finance, anything to do with legal, contracts. Like there's so many reasons. And then instead of having this one central database to attack, you now have these like 15 nodes. So if you're going to go in, you've got to beat 256-bit encryption, and you have to take down each one of these nodes. It's a pretty tall order. Essentially make sure that you're preserving your data. I actually pulled some statistics because I was working on a project that was relatively similar to this. Not in the application, but more so about document privacy for signing contracts. And I pulled up some really interesting stats. Hackers attack every 39 seconds on average, 2,244 times a day. Records are frequently targeted from different companies. The average cost of a single data breach, so if you're a company, in the US, the average cost of one single data breach, somebody coming in to mess with your records, by the time you do all the research, by the time you get you pay your IT guys to go in, by the time you even know that it happened, never mind what they've done to you in the meantime, is $3.92 million. That's like a medium. That's an average cost for one single attack on your servers. If you're a company, $3.92 million. Like, that's huge.
It's crazy.
Yeah, if you're small or you're a medium-sized business, like that's enough to sink, especially in these times. That's enough to sink most businesses right now, right? And as you mentioned a stat, which I'd kind of heard of previously, which was the average time to identify a breach in 2019 was actually 206 days. Information lost cost businesses an average of $5.9 million for each case in 2018. And that's like the number one thing is information loss. When somebody hacks into one of these servers, takes down the information and just erases it, and you don't have redundancy in some of your stuff. You can't find what the source was. And some of these guys are really good. I also heard it reported that the average antivirus software, and I'm not like playing the fear game here. I'm just talking about things that I found. Maybe I am, but I'm not meaning to. I'm talking about things that people should know.
It's the truth, basically.
Yeah, it's the truth. The average
situation.
Exactly. Average antivirus software just isn't adequate to be able to protect your computer or your company's computer. And I think a lot of people are kind of misguided by that. It's not adequate protection. So really, like, I guess what it boils down to is there's a lot of other third-party services that you're trusting your information to keep your information protected. And then we have like hacks in some of the largest servers in the world, like recently Twitter. Yeah. I mean,
it's a broken model, basically. It's broken.
Yeah,
it is. It just doesn't work.
And that's why I love what you guys are doing, and that's why I really see the use case for it. And I think that it's interesting. I think that we really need to use blockchain technology to reevaluate the way that we look at databases and the way that we look at kind of like preserving some of this information, because I think it's really important. Hackers are getting smarter, and it's not getting any harder for them to break in. Just people are becoming a little bit more naive, thinking that they can't be touched. And if you are a small or a medium business size owner, and definitely if you are like a large scale business size owner and you're leaving yourself vulnerable, then that's pretty scary. I know you've kind of had some preliminary conversations with people, Ricardo. Like I've been talking to you since kind of the original launch of the product and everything that you've been doing. What are the kind of companies right now that you're engaging with, that you're talking to? What are they saying about the product? And what's kind of the response been whenever you're sitting down and having conversations? Is this something that people understand the need for? Is this something that people kind of understand the product market fit? Or is it just something that that's kind of lost on them right now? Like, what are the kind of companies you're speaking to, and what are the response?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely something that's going to come. So people are interested in blockchain. Most people don't understand really what blockchain is. They're just curious, and they understand that's related to security in some fashion or another. Some are more educated about the subject, but usually they just have like an idea of what it is, and they want to use it in some way, because usually companies want to be like tech savvy and want to use all the latest technology. Sometimes it's not the best idea, and there are trends like microservices was a big trend, and for most companies it doesn't even make sense to use it. But yeah, so we've been talking to some companies, and mostly they reach us because they are interested in the concept, but they're just putting their feet in the water. They're trying to understand what's the ecosystem, what's out there, what makes sense for them or not.
Yeah,
and we try to explain it in a straightforward way. So let's say you're a company and you want to secure your data, and you look at blockchain. And blockchain seems like something that's pretty secure, because you've got the Bitcoin network, and no one can compromise that, right? So information is right there. You can look at it, you can download it to your computer, and you cannot change it. So what are your options at the moment? So perhaps you've heard of Ethereum, but Ethereum is like a big clog at the moment, because you have to pay a lot in fees to put data there. Like a traditional enterprise application would never run on top of Ethereum, just couldn't.
Yeah,
they would have to pay huge amounts of fees to pump their data there. It wouldn't be feasible in any way, any possible way. Then you've got much better technology. That's EOS and EOSIO related technologies. So you would probably lean towards there. So what's the problem with those technologies that in fact we use? We use EOS currently as the backbone for Blockbase. So, and here it gets a little technical, but I don't know how deep I should go.
Yeah.
But basically it's still costly. So if you want to store like a terabyte of data in any EOSIO chain, you've got a big problem because it's going to cost you a lot. So usually you store just a little bit of data because it just doesn't work that way. It has a lot of cost associated to store data there. So that's where Blockbase makes a difference, because it's not one network. It's a network of networks. So if a company needs to store their data on a blockchain, we will issue, or it will issue, a sidechain for them that will be specified exactly for their needs. So it will be as big, as secure, as decentralized as they want. When they go to an existing network, they have to fit there with how it works. Yeah. And if it costs a lot, it costs a lot. End of story. So basically that's the situation. Basically that's one of the main advantages of Blockbase. Besides of that, it has a perfect integration with querying, traditional querying languages. So if you're used to using a traditional database, you'll move to Blockbase very easily. And it's got privacy built in. So any data you store there, it can be completely encrypted from the database name to the record data. Yep. Everything. So everything can be encrypted. So yeah, so that's basically the value proposition that we show the companies that talk to us. And we get very different types of companies talking to us. Some are related to the medical area. Yeah. So logistics, hospitals, and so forth. Some are related to asset management, like property management and that type of stuff, and debt management. Some are blockchain apps, like dApps, that have problems with storing their data on the blockchains that we use because of the costs, and are looking at it from a cost perspective. So we've got a big spectrum of different entities that are looking to Blockbase and finding it interesting. That said, it's like this transition won't happen in 1 year. This will take a decade or more. We're at the beginning. So like 2 years ago, people said that the blockchain was at the early 90s of the internet. I guess we're still there, but perhaps a little bit further ahead. Perhaps we're in the 2000s. Before YouTube came along and Google was the all-star, I guess. Definitely. But people are looking into it. It's getting a little bit more mainstream. So yeah, so that's the current situation where we're at.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think that what we just talked about is a pretty good and relatively concise, kind of talk about what your unique service proposition is for Blockbase. I know it's interesting myself, and I think that you nailed it. I think previously, a lot of companies were taking a look at blockchain. It was kind of a novelty. They had heard it thrown around. It's become kind of something that a lot of companies are looking at instituting these days, and they really should, just for a variety of reasons. And then we ran into this problem where we didn't quite know which box to fit it in, and we were trying to make things blockchain, and we were trying to kind of squeeze blockchain in these different realms. And now I think we've come to this realm where we've also increased the UI, UX. We've made it much easier to be able to onboard people. And now we're starting to find like real legitimate business cases that make sense for blockchain. And I think that ultimately, along with some of the decentralized aspects, voting, governance, and other kind of cool things that blockchain makes sense for, is really going to start paving us ahead. And I think that you're right on the cusp of that with what you guys are doing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Love what you're doing. It's the perfect use case. It is blockchain as a database, which is what blockchain is. So Ricardo, if there's any companies who are out there and they're looking to dip their toes, because I know there's kind of CEOs at the top, talking to some of their CTOs, and they're like, yeah, go check out that blockchain stuff. But I don't think that there's a more applicable use for blockchain than what you guys are doing. How can they get in touch with you? How can they come and find out more about the product?
So they can find all of our contacts on Blockbase.Network. From there, they can find us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Telegram. So we're all on all those networks.
For sure.
We've got also a contact at Blockbase.Network. They can send emails directly, and we're there. We will talk to them, and we'll see if it makes sense for them to use a blockchain, specifically Blockbase. Yep. Because sometimes people just want to find out if it makes sense or not. In some cases it doesn't, but we're there. So Blockbase is inside a big consulting company. We've got the muscle to leverage up big software solutions on top of Blockbase for any client any sizable client that appears. We've got the muscle for that. So we're looking forward for those contacts. Exactly.
Definitely. Go out and reach out to Ricardo. If you're doing something and you want something that's kind of viable, that makes sense, you're looking to work with a good guy. And as Ricardo mentioned, they're part of a large kind of conglomerate of companies too. They can hook you up. And I'm doing this not because I'm being paid by Ricardo, but because I truly love the application and I love you as a person, man. You're an amazing,
thank you, man.
You're amazing guy. And I really believe in what you're doing. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or anything else that you wanted to say to anybody who might be watching before we head on our way?
I don't think so. I think you have a tendency to finish the videos very, very well. And you're more eloquent than me in English for sure. So I think you finished very well.
Thank you, buddy. I think some might disagree, but I'll take the compliments any day. Flattery will get you everywhere. Thanks so much for coming on, Ricardo. I look forward to doing this again with you soon. You guys are doing a great job out there. Anybody who's watching, go check out Blockbase. Links are going to be below. And thank you so much for your time today, buddy.
Thank you, Matt.
My pleasure. See you soon.